So this is a little bit of a departure from the normal microwave one channel project. I'd like to talk about how to check out your headphones. And through the years we've all collected so many different types of headphones, mostly because they break. Usually the headphone earpiece that is going over your head on the band, it flexes too much and eventually that gives up, and so the headphones are no good. So you have to go in there and do some repairs. That's practical for a lot of us. And other people just throw them in the trash and buy new headphones. So I thought we would do a test fixture for headphones. This is a test fixture that would be able to measure simple parameters of headphones like are the two elements in phase? What happens if the two earpieces are out of phase? What's that do to your head? What's the frequency response of the headphones? Headphones for communications quality would be expected to have a much better communications type response curve that would improve the intelligibility of what you're listening to, like on a receiver. But hi-fi headphones are made to give you the broadest spectrum of the music or whatever program you're listening to. So two different types of designs completely with headphones. So I've got this book here that was just put out by my friend Greg Fedchek. Greg is, besides being a large format painter, he's quite a satirist and writer, but he's an audiophile when it comes to headphones. And I think this is because as we age, our ears and our response change. It's especially noted with men compared to women. The high end seems to go down dB for dB, so that by the time you're toward the end of your life, you might be down 25 or 30 dB at, say, 8 kilohertz. That's a pretty radical reduction in your high-end ability to hear sounds. So the high end of the frequency spectrum is really what takes a hit. Headphones can help. Equalization of the high end can help. So Greg has gone completely to headphones. He won't even listen to speakers. He doesn't find listening to speakers enjoyable at all. So that's why I brought Greg into this conversation. So what we're building is a simple test fixture that's going to be able to test headphones. It's not testing your head. We're not trying to reproduce your head here, or your ear structure, or even the way that you hear sounds. We are simply trying to characterize headphones. Whether you're talking about these early 20th century moving coil Baldwins, which were state-of-the-art, before 1920. As a matter of fact, moving coil headphones are still state-of-the-art. You're going to pay a lot of money for the modern versions of these types of headphones. Or you're talking about World War II B-17 headphones with the chamois cushions as we're trying to intercept German Messerschmitts. Or is it just a simple Sony Walkman headset? Or maybe some Beats or some of these AKG reference headphones. We'd like to be able to make some basic measurements, and to do that we're going to use a system called an artificial ear. Now what an artificial ear is, it's basically a microphone. We're going to put a pair of microphones on one of those dummy heads. You might have seen many YouTube videos about making a dummy head binaural microphone. Well, we're not really making something like that for a microphone. We're making that so that we can put our headphones on something and do some measurements. Also, we're going to do those measurements with spectral analysis in the time domain and the frequency domain. So to do that, you would need some very expensive equipment, and B&K or high-end audio equipment. That's not what we're talking about. Let's try to do some very simple measurements using an oscilloscope. And if you can't afford an oscilloscope or you don't have one, let's try to use a discarded PC, like an old XP or a Windows 7 PC, and make some basic measurements based on the sound card in that PC. So our goal is in this entire video series would be to try to keep our cost under $50 for the whole setup. As a matter of fact, if you've got an old PC and you've got a pretty good junk box, this thing should cost under $20 to put together so we can do some basic headphone testing. So the first thing we ask is, why do we use headphones? What are headphones all about? Well, first principle on headphones is you're going to hear more. It's going to be more sensitive than listening to a loudspeaker. So that's the first reason that people use headphones. You hear more and you hear lower level signals. Also, if you have the possibility that the loudspeaker might upset somebody or you might interfere with other people trying to listen to something, the headphones isolate you from the other people. So that's very important when you're doing communications as well as listening to music. As we get older, our ears tend to fade. Like my ears would not be a very good reference for any kind of audio measurements. Maybe your ears aren't what they used to be. That's the way it goes with the human oral system. It's a logarithmic system, which makes up for a lot, but in the end, you start to lose your high end usually. So no matter what kind of headphones you use, normally you will need to have some type of equalization included as you age naturally. The tightness of the headphones to the head can influence what you're hearing, both in the high end and especially at the low end. If you don't have a good seal between the headphones and your ears, you're not going to hear the same thing. So let's take that out of the equation. I do not want to use human ears at all in this measurement. This has nothing to do with human ears or the human head. We're trying to measure the headphones, not your head. So I will purposely make the seal between the headphones and the artificial ears as tight as possible. So that's going to deviate a little bit on the way you're thinking with trying to exactly reproduce the human head. That's not what this is about. We're not going to reproduce what a human can hear. We're going to try to measure just the headphones. I'm using a system that's pretty well established. That is the Electret microphone. The Electret microphone has a flat response pretty much through the whole spectrum, the whole audio spectrum, from 20 hertz up to 20,000 hertz. And because of that, and its low cost, that's what we're going to make our artificial ears out of. Now, I would like to do this testing at a high enough level that we don't have problems with noise or ground loops. That means we're going to need to amplify the Electret up to the line level. So to do that, these little amplifier boards that I picked up that have the microphones on them, they give you a little bit of power supply decoupling, and on the rear there's actually an op-amp that amplifies the microphone, gives it proper bias, and it even has a little volume adjust potentiometer. That's going to allow us to match the two ears, left and right, so that they have the same gain. And I'll select the two that have the best response. I bought about 10 of these to do some testing. These were not expensive, something that I got on Amazon. We'll be mounting this on the artificial head. Okay, so I've chopped his ears off and flattened the side with some sandpaper. Getting ready to coat the head with something. Once I get the the holes put in that are going to hold the electrets. That's next. So I carved out the little depressions that the electret is going to go in with a wood carver. You could use any type of X-Acto knife and so on just to carve this out. And I've just got a piece of number 12 wire that I chucked up in the drill, and I just drilled out at an angle. That's going to get the wires out. Remember, we need to supply power to the electret amplifier, and we need to get the audio out. So we're talking about at least 3 leads that we need to go through this hole on each side. So as you can see, I've carved out a little place where the electret microphone is going to be sunk in there so that the electret goes in enough to be a little below flush, not too far. Then I'm going to make a ring of foam to simulate the ear, and the ring will be large enough to pick up the entire muff of the earphones, of the headphones. And hopefully we'll create a better seal to the head. So let's look at some ideas on how we are going to make this headphone measurement system. As you can see, I've got a foam head. This is one of those low-cost foam heads that usually arrives with all kinds of marks all over it, which is fine because I don't care about that. What I do care about, however, is how closely the headphones are interfacing with the head. As you can see, there are gaps, even with those headphones that have a chamois type earmuff system. So what I would like to do is take the ears right off and try to flatten the head on the 2 sides and make kind of an artificial foam interface that will somewhat isolate and allow a better connection to the electret microphone. Now that might be some soft foam around the sides of the head, and that's going to allow the headphones to make a better seal, and we should get better performance, especially at the low frequencies. As you can see, I've made a little panel for the front. I haven't attached that yet. That panel has an on-off switch. This will be battery operated for low noise. We don't want any pickup going into the PC, and even hooking a regular signal generator to the PC, there was some ground loop issues happening. You'd like to have those 2 instruments on the same power line, but better yet, you'd like to have them isolated in the audio path. I could not do that very effectively. So we're going to have a completely battery operated system. And then we have a miniature plug. Most headphones today use a miniature stereo plug like this. And sometimes you get some adapters that can allow it to go into a larger jack. So I've got a miniature stereo jack, and I decided to use a mono 1/4-inch jack for the old-fashioned headphones. And I'll use adapters for everything in between. So with the mono headsets, we're only going to be using half of the drive from the PC. I could get fancy and mix the 2-channel output, but I don't think that's necessary to do our frequency response tests. And it's certainly not necessary for the earphone driver phase test that I want to do. You only probably will need the right channel. So we have a stereo and a mono jack. I've also got a couple of banana jacks for headphones that might just have a wire lead connections or tip connections. And this will all be hooked up to those 2 little electrified microphone elements that are going to be in each side of the head. So the next time you see this, it should look a little bit different. Next, the head needs to have a skin layer. It's too tough to work with the styrofoam directly. It's not very strong, and it makes a lot of squeaky noises. I don't think this is going to be the best substance around a microphone. So I've found some interesting Rust-Oleum leak seal flexible rubber coating. Now, this might react with the styrofoam and cause all kinds of havoc, but I'm hoping it doesn't, and it makes a sort of deadening skin effect on the outside of the head. So next, let's put a coat on, see what it does. Wow, it's already having some kind of effect, a kind of a mottled, cool look. Let's see how this dries. It's a piece of art now. So yes, my experiment with the toluene-based spray paint was a disaster. I ended up having to sand it, put some filler all over the skull, and then hit it with some primer. And then I was able to put some polyurethane over it, and finally I could use my spray paint once I had isolated the styrofoam from the toluene-based spray paint. And quite a disaster, but an artistic rendering is the result. Looks like something that I may have done in a 6th grade art class, perhaps? Nothing too radical here. I'm just going to mount the head onto the board. I've got 3 large screws that are going to go up into the head just as a little bit of support. But it's mainly going to be the glue on the base that's going to provide the connection to the board. Okay, sounds like Tim's in the background here. Let's turn him off. Okay, a little bit better. Oh, I've got the 2 Adafruit amplified microphones. These amplified microphones are really cute. They include an op-amp preamp for the microphone, and provide bias to the Electret microphone, so they're just ideal. And you're not going to find anything simpler and cheaper and ready to go than these little modules. Can you use Electrets and build your own amplifier? Of course you can. But this was just very simple. So in this diagram, which I'll show a better picture than this printout, I've attempted to separate left from right in colors. Now, as you can see, right is the ring. Right is the ring. And I've colored that red. So the convention is to use the red wire for the right channel, which is the ring of the stereo plug. Right, red, ring. Say that about 5 times. Right, red, ring. And you'll never forget what left is and what right is on a stereo plug. Now, right is conventionally right, the right headphone driver, and the right is on the right side of your head here. So that's the convention that we're going to be using with our artificial ear test system. Also, the microphone cable, it's important that you have at least 2 different colors, one for each channel, and a shield. If you have an extra wire, you can use that as well and tie that to the shield. So it might be red, green, white, red, green, black, and shield. But use some kind of well-shielded microphone cable for this hookup. These little guys run on anything from about 2.7 volts to 5 volts. So you could use a 5-volt regulator, for instance, to power them. You could use one of these rechargeable lithium-ion packs, which are usually, 3.6, 3.8 volts. Or you could use a pair of, double A's or triple A's. I do want to go with battery power just to keep the noise and hum down, and to minimize the possibility of some type of grounding issue that's going to put some noise in. Because we are using a PC as our measurement system, and those things do not like ground loops, especially into the sound cards. Here's our front panel. The front panel has both a mono and stereo input. It has an on-off switch, and it's got a couple of bananas that are used for headsets that just have tips or just wired headsets. So the next thing we're going to do is test the two microphones to make sure they're approximately set at the same gain. And by the same gain, I mean if you put a certain sound level into this one and a certain sound level into this one, they'll both put out the same amount of millivolts, RMS, or peak to peak, however you're measuring them. It doesn't have to be perfect. We'll balance it out using your computer sound card volume controls, but you want to get them close. Also, these modules do have capacitive feedback on the op amp, which limits the high end that they process. So there's a roll-off that's controlled by a capacitor. Let's make sure that's well out of the audio band. If it isn't, we'll have to remove that capacitor or at least change it to a smaller value. The gain bandwidth of these is approximately 600 kilohertz. So if you divide 20 kilohertz into 600 kilohertz, you'll find out that we're limited to about a gain of 30. So that's the way it works. Now a gain of 30 is going to be more than enough gain to drive to line level, so we'll probably be bringing that down a little bit. So that's the rundown. The next step is to actually mount these inside the head, and I have to redo my carving and recess these modules into the head and do the wiring and run the wiring in. Let me briefly describe the setup for setting the two little microphone amplifiers to be roughly equivalent before we mount them into the artificial head. Initially I'm going to be using the scope, and I'll just use some voice and then sine waves and test it at a few different frequencies to make sure it's somewhat flat. We do not want excess gain because of course the headphones are close coupled. So I would say with normal speaker volume, and you can see I've got the two earpieces opposing and the speaker in back, so they should roughly have the same kind of audio hitting them. I'm not going to go crazy here. And you don't want that output set too high. I'm aiming for 50 millivolts RMS with normal room volume out of the speaker. So that should not overload the line input of the computer, and it should put us in a nice spot. You do not want these amplifiers at full gain, because the higher the gain, the more restricted the frequency response because of the gain bandwidth idea. So you want the gain set fairly low on the amplifiers to maximize the frequency range that the amplifiers are handling. You want to be much more than what you're trying to measure. So for instance, if we're interested in 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, a bandwidth that's 4 or 5 times that, or something that's capable of measuring up to maybe 100 kilohertz. And remember, since we are using battery power, 3 volt target, I've got the power supply set for 3 volts DC for this particular test.
Oh, well,
Okay, we have both channels on the screen.
You better get the gap insurance.
The speaker's basically an equidistant position to the microphones, off to the side, of course.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and you can see that one channel is higher than the other.
Yeah, so cover the value. So let's say the
So the two amplifiers do not have the same gain out of the box.
You don't want
right,
it's 40,
left.
It's 4 times 6 0.25%.
And of course, right, left on your head, which is opposite for the camera.
Is based on.
It's a little easier to see with the BFO on. And we can see that the gain of one ear is about 1/2 of the gain of the other ear. So it's about a 6 dB difference. Pretty close. I mean, this one might be a little less, but pretty close. I've got them pretty matched up. We brought that channel up, so they're both equal now. Go back to the other one. Yeah. Okay, good enough. So we balanced them good enough to mount them into the head now. So I am on the 100 millivolts RMS scale, and I'm targeting 50 millivolts RMS. So that's going to be plenty of signal for a line input. Of course, you can use the PC scope for this measurement. Again, not too critical since we can fine-tune the gain of each microphone in the volume control application that's built into Windows. So I'm passing the wire through the hole that I made through the back of the skull and mounting the microphone unit with the thick 3M VHB. That allows me to give it some good support, but it's still kind of a rubbery substance. If I had to, I can remove the unit and readjust the gain. So that's about as far as I'm going to go with that. I've taken some of this very soft foam that's used for window sealing. It's almost like memory foam. And I've put it around the front of the element so that the electret microphone is completely captured by the foam. And that's going to reduce any possibility of vibration. It's going to provide kind of a surface style of pickup on the electret element, and we shouldn't have any effects from the head. Next, I'm going to be working on the actual seal around this. That's also going to be foam. I'm going to use some weather stripping there. So when the headphones contact the microphone, there's just going to be a small space that's going to be surrounded by foam, and we should get a nice clean pickup. Okay, the weather stripping has been put on. This is really soft. That's made a really good connection to the head, and I hope nobody doubts that we're going to have a nice seal. Okay, as you can see, we now have a headphone test fixture. The headphone test fixture is ready to be tested. We've got microphone and speaker outputs, which will be going to the computer. We have these very soft supports that are going to help to stabilize the headphones, as well as to make a very good seal to the element. If I hold this up, you're going to see the element in there. Everything is suspended in foam, and this is that really gushy memory foam type stuff. Very dense, and that's going to give us some great microphone stability and isolation. The headphones are going to sit on these rubbery ridges here. It's not going to be any problem with vibration because we've got a piece of hardwood with some nice rubber feet. So this should be quite a nice fixture. Battery operated. In the next video, we're going to be working with the head. We're going to install the software into the PC and see what we can do with this test fixture.